the harder you push your body, the harder you push your mind, the harder you push your spirit, then you can look back when you are faced with challenges and say, oh, I've done that before. If I've accomplished that back then, I can accomplish what's in front of me today.
Hey, welcome back to the Star Power. This is James Barbour, and I have got, I'm so honored to have this gentleman on my show. He is somebody I met through my buddy Craig Duswalt, who has been on the Star Power podcast. And when I listened to him talk and I listened to him tell his story, I was moved, I was motivated, I was inspired, and then also just to know what he does as a business person. Um, Green Beret. I mean, you're retired Green Beret. Like, my father-in-law was, he was a Marine, but it's like he was a Marine. No, he's always a Marine, right? Always a Green Beret, just retired. So I'm very honored to have on the incredible Larry Broughton on the Star Power podcast. Thanks for being here, buddy.
Jim, it's good to see you, man. Now, I got to correct you. I'm not a retired Green Beret. Retired means either, you did your 20 years, your 35 years, you had a medical retirement. I just spent I guess it was a little over 8 years on Special Forces A teams, and then I got out. So I spent a little over 9 years in the Army, and then I got out to try something else.
Yeah,
So
but still, man, 8 years. So
yeah,
thank you for your service, number one.
it was an honor. Thank you.
Yeah, but
That's it.
it's sort of nonchalant. Yeah, 8 years in special forces, like like everybody can do that. Just your average every.
Whatever. It's a great.
Wow.
It was a great
How is
experience.
this before we get into like how is that experience like? Because the training must have been rigorous, right? I remember talking to my father-in-law about
Yeah.
what the Marine Corps has to go through, but then you took it up a notch because you went special forces. What was that like?
Yeah. I think most folks who go into the special operations community, you know, have their esprit de corps, and my team's better than your team. But anyone I think who gets into the special operations community, whether it's, the SEALs or Force Recon or the Green Berets or even Ranger Battalion, yeah, you're cut from a different cloth for sure. And there's a lot of guys I've spoken to, two in particular, I have pretty regular conversations with that. Hey, if you're going to go into the special operations community, there's probably something a little bit off with you anyway. And I'm being serious
Yeah,
about this.
no, I get it.
Kind of the anecdotal interviews that a buddy of mine and I have been doing with special operations guys is there's oftentimes family trauma that they're dealing with, you know. Not always, but many. I'm not good enough. Will I ever measure up? You know? And so you start with that, and then you add in the rigors of getting through it. But it was unlike anything I had seen before or experienced. Thank goodness they didn't have the internet when I went in. I mean, it was just kind of coming out,
Yeah.
but you couldn't do that quick research. In fact, when I went down to the Army recruiter's office, it's a funny story how I actually got in, but we could talk about that if you want. But when he talked about special forces, I didn't even know what the Green Berets were,
Hmm.
back then. I mean, I had heard of them, but I didn't really know what they did. And then when he explained it, I said, "Yeah, sign me up for that." But yes, it was physically challenging, no doubt about it, physically challenging. But I think what one of the things that separates the selection and assessment phase to get into special forces, the nickname is the Green Berets. Sometimes people confuse special forces with special operations.
Hmm.
It's the mental stuff. Boy, do they know how to screw with you and test your mental acuity,
Yeah.
right? And just push you over and over and over again. Because very quick little story to make the point. During what used to be called phase one, so there's a selection and assessment phase, a pre-phase, and then phase one of the training. They used to call it survival phase, and it's about 4.5 weeks long. And you're learning basics of land navigation and small unit patrols and the physical, there's pushing you, you're going up for these 12-mile rucksack marches in the UR or the sand dunes in North Carolina. And it culminates in this multi-day survival phase where you go with very few resources. You have a M16, or that's what we had then.
Hmm.
No ammunition though. You had a sheath knife, a little, pocket knife, and a rucksack, and I think he had 1 quart of water, and that was it. And then you had to go build all this stuff. So they gave you a book of matches to go out there. And you ask yourself, everyone here knows how to start a fire from rubbing sticks together or whatever it is. But why
Right.
are they giving you a book of matches? Well, for those from the South, particularly the Southeast, you'll know this. There's a grocery stand called Winn-Dixie. On that book of matches was a picture of a steak, and on the other side
No.
was a laughing pig. That's why they gave it to you, just to F with you.
You go, you're
Because
not eating
you
today.
haven't eaten in days. You're burning probably 5,000 calories a day. You might be consuming maybe 1,000 calories a day. And then you're going to go into this multi-day, no food survival
Yeah.
phase. That's why. It's little things like that throughout the entire program that just is screwing with you.
Wow.
So
You know, it's
it
interesting
was
you say that.
remarkable.
You talked about, my when I was in high school, um, I was in performance. I played sports, but I was always drawn to some like a military advent, whether it was Green Berets or Rangers. I was always drawn to that.
Yeah.
And in many ways, I kind of wish I had followed that path. I still do. And
Interesting.
and I never, it's like, why was I drawn? Why was I drawn? You mentioned something, my father, who I love dearly, was a severe alcoholic and always was my entire life. And until the very end of his life, like he actually got sick. He got cancer and had surgery, and then after that stopped drinking. And and that was the only time. It was probably the last like 5 years of his life.
Mm,
And he died in his 70s, right? So I grew up in that environment. And when you
yes.
said that they all come from someplace not feeling good enough, not fitting in, not, like wanting to
Yeah.
overcome,
Yeah.
that really rung true to me when you just
Yeah.
said that right now. So
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
So
Well, I had a early mentor of mine. We ended up calling him my spiritual mentor, but he had described me one day when I was really at my bottom. He said, Larry, you're an egomaniac with an inferiority complex.
my gosh.
And he meant that out of love, though.
Yeah.
And if you think, James, about any high achiever and you know a lot, you hang out with these people, the common thread for many of these people is that we have this tendency to think, if they did it, I can do it. How hard can it be? Right? There's a little bit of egomania in there to think that I can do anything. But at
Yeah.
the same time, we're always feeling like we don't measure up. We're not good enough. There's someone right behind me. I can hear their footsteps, and so I got to run a little faster. It's a real weird dichotomy that high achievers have that I have found that there's this red thread through all of them, most of them, that pertains to this topic right here. And why am I sharing that? Well, because a lot of us question ourselves sometimes, like, why am I so weird about this? Well, we're all like this. We're humans. We're complex individuals, right? So I'm sure some of your listeners are resonating with this part of the conversation right now.
100%. Very,
Yeah.
it's a very astute, viewpoint of that because I think it's true. And
Yeah.
even recently, the Super Bowl just happened. A couple days before we're recording this, and
Yeah.
you have these two amazing quarterbacks, two amazing teams. Patrick Mahomes, who is undoubtedly one of the greatest quarterbacks ever to live, and he
Sure.
had an off day. And and certainly there were other things that went into place. He's kicking himself, but he's going, I need to go, I need to go, I need to go. He's pushing,
Yes.
pushing, pushing, but he's also worried about the guy that's coming behind him. And
Absolutely. And you got to think about that, him from a leadership perspective, right? After that third sack and he walked off the field and there was a camera on his face, you could see he was absolutely flustered. Like, how do I pull out of this
yeah,
thing? No one has, and anyway, it was a remarkable, from a leadership perspective, just watching the dynamics of a super high achiever then on one of the most public platforms ever having an off day.
yeah, literally getting knocked on his ass multiple times,
Yes.
literally and figuratively and mentally.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's also that what was interesting is that like even with all of his skill sets, his ability to run, his abilities, he couldn't avoid it. There was something else that was how do you solve problems that they're multi-layered.
Yeah.
Um, so so after military, I mean, what if you don't know Larry? Larry's a hotelier. I mean, very successful in the hotel business and in acquiring hotels and and running them, and which is a huge undertaking on its own. So how did you make that?
Yeah.
What was the segue or transition from that?
An accident, total accident. Um, the story I share publicly, and some of if listeners know my story, there were a couple of times where I was, deployed either on a training mission or whatever, and being in a country and thinking, damn, if these knuckleheads can run a country, I can run a country. How
Hmm.
hard can it be? That kind of thing, right? Because
Got
I
it.
was really starting to get interested in public policy and international relations. And because when I went into the military, I didn't know, like Central America was the hot spot at the time. And I'm embarrassed. No, I guess I'm not, because most people didn't at the time. Most people didn't know where Honduras was or Nicaragua. And if you think
Yeah.
about the 80s, what was going on, Iran
Right.
Contra and all that kind of stuff. And so I remember the guy, Tony Nicholson. I said to him, he had done a little bit of, he'd been around the world before he even went into the military. I'll leave it at that.
Hmm.
But I remember him kneeling down in the sand on Fort Bragg and drawing a map of Central America and explaining to me like what was going on, right? And so then I started reading the newspapers back then when you read newspapers and piecing this whole thing together, like, oh, this is like a soap opera that's going on. And I got fascinated with it. And the more I got into it, the more I started thinking, well, gosh, maybe I can make a bigger impact on the world if I got into the political arena or went into the State Department or some other three-letter agency,
Hmm.
after this. And so, but I needed to go to university to do that.
Right.
I barely graduated high school. As it turns out I'm dyslexic and didn't know that until I went and took the entrance exam for the military, the ASVAB. Um, and, um, and so I got out, moved to San Francisco. I had some friends who had moved to San Francisco. And back then, the California university system was the best value university system in the country. It's not any longer, by the way, but it was then. And so I thought I was going to, I thought, so I moved to California to get into California university system
Hmm.
and go to school for political science. And my first job in order to do that was at a little no-tell motel in San Francisco, a pay by the hour
Oh,
type of
wow.
place in the Tenderloin district, which is kind of a ghetto area in
Yeah.
San Francisco. And so that's kind of how I got into the hotel industry. I started there. I went in 11 o'clock at night, got off at 7 o'clock in the morning, and then went to school during the day, worked out in the evenings, did the
Wow.
whole thing all over
So
again.
literally immersed yourself, unbeknownst to you, what would become
Had no idea.
later on.
It was a means to an end, right? But that little property was purchased by an investment group and renovated with the intention of turning it into what ended up becoming one of the first boutique hotels in the country. And I had a lot of real world leadership experience. And so I was kind of helping run this little thing and ultimately was asked to stick around to become a partner in the company when after three hotels had been acquired, and there's a lot of steps in between there.
Yeah.
But anyway, I was at the I I had a newspaper writer who was writing a feature on me a million years ago that said that I was in the wrong place until the right time came along.
Great.
Like an opportunity came along and I
Yeah.
snatched it, because I was offered this partnership position in a hotel in a real estate company, basically, and didn't even have a college degree yet, you know,
Yeah.
and so I saw the opportunity and snatched it, and so that first company became Joie de Vivre Hotels, that some people will know. Hyatt ended up buying that as part of the Hyatt. You could go to the Hyatt website and you'll see the Joie de Vivre collection um, on there. But so I was there for the first 14 years of that when we picked up about 14 hotels over that period of time. And then
Well, can
I
I
got
ask you this
married.
before
Sure,
you did that?
sure.
So, for number one, did you finish college?
I still have not finished college. I'm highly educated. I attended College of San Mateo for a couple of years. I went to UC Santa Barbara.
Hmm.
I'm probably two quarters away from getting a degree there. I went on to Stanford and did their executive program for 2 years. Um,
My father-in-law taught at Stanford.
is that right?
Yeah.
I'm telling you, this The professors there are world class. I could not believe there was no ums or ahs or no stumbling
Yeah,
when they got up there and spoke. These are people who have New York Times best-selling books, and these
yeah.
are consultants to the White House. These folks,
The
Jim
reason I
Collins, so
ask,
those types are there. It's
yeah,
mind-blowing how smart these folks are.
yeah, unreal. Like, I hear some people talking. I'm like, I don't know what that seven-syllable word is. Um, the reason I ask you is because my viewpoint changed. I have multiple, well, not multiple. I went to university. I've got, majors and minors,
Mhm.
and when I got into the industry, my industry doesn't require a degree at all,
No.
and people spend so much money on these degrees and for theater or for entertainment. And
Sure, sure.
oftentimes, and they come out with debt. And
Yeah,
oftentimes, they're coming out 4 years later if they go a master's, 7, 8 years later. And
sure.
the people that are starring in the shows that I was doing had
Yeah,
already been, they high school and they're in the business and they've done 6 Broadway shows and are making,
yeah,
a couple hundred grand a year.
sure.
And my viewpoint shifted because unless you are a doctor or a lawyer where you
I agree.
require those things, I think, and even with my kids, we're talking about it because my oldest is going to be heading into those college years soon.
Sure,
We're
sure.
older parents, but um, she's like, you know what? I want to get into real estate. I don't need a degree to do that. I want to learn. I want to go. I want to invest. I want to buy. And she goes, I kind of want to like, find a place where I can learn and do, right? And I was like,
Totally
great,
agree.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah, the education system in the country has certainly changed over the years. It
Yeah,
was
for sure.
built for the industrial age, frankly, and hasn't changed much
Yeah,
since then. The industrial age was like be a rule follower,
right.
conform, right? That's not doing us any good, as it turns
No.
out. Look where that got us,
Yeah.
not in a not very good spot, I'm afraid. So I agree with you. Like, unless you're going to be an attorney or you're going to be a doctor or something along those lines, I'm not sure that university is the best thing. We did not push it on our kids,
Yeah.
that's for sure. And I think they're going to be just fine. I do think that you need to have a commitment to lifelong learning
Right. I
for
agree.
sure, but there's so many other opportunities out there for people to learn, right? I mean, someone is going to start there are organizations like Keller Williams, for instance. You'd mentioned
Yep.
real estate. They do a great job of training people. They have great training programs for their agents and brokers
Yeah.
and everyone who's in that space, right? So
Or
employers are
EXP,
taking that
the
upon themselves.
new, well, it's not very new, but EXP, which is sort of a rival to,
Yes, of course, of course.
you know,
Yeah, because well, listen, Gallup does their State of the American Workforce survey every year, right?
yeah.
And something like I forget what it is, 67%, I think, of the American workforce is disengaged or actively disengaged.
Hmm.
Like that means they're stealing from their employer, they're running the business, you know, their own business outside of or inside their employer's business, like really
Yeah, I see.
nefarious kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
But when you peel back the layers of this survey, what you end up finding is that most employees expect their employer to help them become better versions of themselves. They want to be trained. Most employers don't do the training. This is why what is it? XRP, what is it?
EXP.
EXP and Keller Williams, they have really high approval ratings of the folks who work inside the organizations because these organizations are intentionally bringing training
Yeah.
to them, right?
It grows their business. It grows the bottom line. It's
Of
smart.
course. So if you're a leader, I guess the lesson out of that is if you've got someone that you're leading, help them become better versions
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
themselves,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah. So no, I do not have a degree, but I am dedicated to lifelong learning. I'm constantly reading books. I listen to podcasts nonstop. I attend seminars, conferences.
you hold
Oh,
seminars, you're a speaker,
yes. Yeah.
so sorry I wanted to go down that path because I think like you. I think that you can learn probably much like in the old days it was you become an apprentice. You want to be a blacksmith, you learn how to do it by doing it. I think those are still ways to go about it. So, all right. So back to your story. So
Yeah.
you 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 were in that company, you said you got married, then what happened?
Yeah, it was the late 90s at this point, and I was starting to feel like my soul was being sucked from me because I was the number two person at this organization. I knew I was never going to be the CEO. You've known me for a while.
Hmm.
My personality, my skill set is as a senior executive, like a CEO. That's how I'm built,
Yeah,
right? A chief
for sure.
executive. Um, and I knew I was never going to be the CEO or the leader of this company. And so it just sucked in my soul. And so that happened for a couple of years. And I was acting out in some pretty nefarious ways because I was just feeling empty. I
Mhm.
was making a great salary and I was the number two guy in the number two hotel company and the number one hotel market in the world, right? Back then, San Francisco, was a bigger destination than New York or Paris or anywhere
Right.
else. And people knew who we were, and we were taking the industry by storm. People knew who we were as a company. And so there was some prestige that went along with it.
Right.
And so when I started talking to friends and mentors and my father-in-law, and said, "Hey, I'm thinking about leaving this company and going doing something else, either finishing my degree, maybe trying to get into the State Department, starting my own company." Without fail, James, they all said, "Are you crazy? You got a good gig going on here, right?" But they said that because they love me. They didn't want to see me hurt. They didn't want to see me fail, whatever, right?
Hmm.
But still, I said, I got to leave. I got to go do my own thing. And so my wife and I at the time, and she was a TV producer at the time in San Francisco, and she was burned out, and we were trying to start a family. So we both said, yeah, this is good timing. And so we'd moved to Santa Barbara first with the intention of starting a family.
Beautiful spot of the
But,
world.
oh gosh, it's amazing. One of my
Hmm.
favorite spots in the world.
Me too.
So we bought a couple of restaurants, coffee shops, and said, let's just do this. This is an easy gig. And then in the meantime, I had a couple of my former partners, investors in one of the hotels in San Francisco who'd contacted me and said, dang, things have not been the same since you left. Wow. Like, if you want to do your own thing, let's go buy a hotel and, let's see how that goes.
Hmm.
There's a message there,
Hmm.
right? Um, and so I thought about it and said, yeah, well, let's go. Let me go find a hotel for us and we'll buy it. And we'll just see where it goes. And so at the same time, again, still living in, so I went out and found a property out in Palm Desert, California, and put that into escrow in November of 2000 and closed escrow January of 2001. And at the same time, I was asked to come in to help with this new construction project in Santa Barbara. And if, for those who don't recall, 2001 was end up what they call the Great Recession, which
Hmm.
it was basically a depression, which is the worst recession since the World War II. Okay,
Yeah.
dot-com bomb, SARS, like avian flu, you might remember
Right.
that, right? All kinds of nefarious, it's just bad stuff, and so the market was crashing. It was the timing really sucked to be starting a hotel company.
Right.
So why did I mention the avian flu or SARS at the time? Well, because all of my investments at the time, all of my income was coming from my partnership distributions in San Francisco. One third of the entire market in San Francisco, the travel market, came from Asia.
Ah.
No one was traveling from Asia at the time. Between the recession and the avian flu, our hotel values dropped about 40% in that
Holy
one
mackerel.
one year. And then we finally had we had our child that year in
Hmm.
June, and then we opened our first hotel. I want to say, which was the one out in Palm Springs. I think we opened it September 1, and then we opened the Santa Barbara Hotel September 7th. And then what happened after that? 9/11. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So between the recession, SARS, and now 9/11, it was kind of like the nail in the coffin for the hotel industry at the time. And so it was really bad. In fact, my former spouse and I, and she's a great woman, by the way, and great mother, we were in Santa Barbara spending the night when 9/11 happened because we had just finishing our soft opening
Yeah.
period. My little baby daughter was there, and 9/11 hit, and just like it was ghost town. People were not traveling people weren't traveling,
Right.
for the months after that, right? I
Yeah.
mean, I remember driving from Santa Barbara down to Orange County, where we had since moved at the time, and driving by LAX. If anyone has been in Los Angeles, you just become immune to all the planes flying over the highway, the
Yeah.
405, and it was a ghost town. And I
Yeah.
remember those signs, the electronic signs as you're approaching LAX, said LAX closed. It was
Wow.
so eerie, right? Now, what had happened, though, thank goodness, I had learned a lot about PR and marketing leading up to this from my former company. We were PR whores in the best way in my
Hmm.
old company because we knew it was bang for the buck marketing, and people should listen to this. You ought to be really good at public relations. I think it's the most cost-effective way to increase the profile of you or your company, right? And so, as it turns out, I sent out several press releases, and that issue, the September issue of Condé Nast Traveler, Travel and Leisure magazine, and a bunch of publications, had all announced the launch of these two hotels, and they had
Hmm.
pictures, profiles in these magazines. And so, after a couple of weeks, James, the people said, maybe even a week, people who had vacations to London or
Aha.
Milan or Italy, they say, I've already got my vacation time booked. Where am I going to go? Opened up these magazines because back then, and by the way, we had great websites.
Yeah.
So because of all that PR,
Totally see where this is going. Yeah.
exactly, because of all that PR, we hit 100% market penetration within the first year on both of these hotels,
Holy mackerel. That's
which usually
great.
takes 3 years to get there, right? Because we were the new hot places in town. So
Yeah.
we went from a ghost town, phones not ringing, no reservations coming in for that first week to all of a sudden it was crazy. It was crazy. And so because of that, we were getting a lot of attention, and then we kind of picked up several properties, two hotels right after that. And then we were just on our way to building the small little empire that we'd had there for several years.
That's
It
incredible.
was a great experience. Learned a lot, offered a lot of opportunities to some people who wouldn't have had opportunities elsewhere. What I started realizing is that I used to say that we attracted the black sheep of the hotel industry,
Mm.
right? They may not fit in another hotel company, but they came to us, because we hired people if they had a great hospitality spirit about them,
Hmm.
we wanted them on the team. You didn't have to fit some mold. 'Cause, there are some, you travel a lot, you stay in a lot of hotels. You can pretty much describe to a T what someone from a Four Seasons
Oh, yeah.
looks like, right? Versus you name the hotel
Yeah.
brand,
And
right?
how they speak to you, you know.
Exactly. Which I'm fine with that. I mean, I
Yeah.
like the, ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. And so it's, you don't say, if somebody says thank you, don't say, yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
My pleasure, or whatever the catchphrase is, right?
Yeah.
We just made it a little bit more informal. As long as you were polite, courteous, dignity, and respect, we were pretty good
Yeah.
uh, with that. And so people could have nose rings and gauges in their ears or tattoos, as long as it served us with a smile and whatever else we wanted in there for the day. So anyway, so that was it was an interesting journey for sure. But in the meantime, I'd gotten divorced, and it was a roller coaster in life for sure.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is what I see is your ability, and this is something I think people should listen to as well. Your
What's that?
ability to take all of the things that you had learned and gleaned through the various stages of your life prior to that and bring them to bear. Because had you not had that marketing sense, had you not had that tenacity, had you not had that drive,
Yeah.
chances are you wouldn't have reached 100% in that first year. So
No, no, no.
it's fascinating.
You're absolutely right. Well, if you're a constant learner and you're wondering how can I make this, make a positive impact on the world, now you got to have a mission, of course. Like what's your mission going to be in life? But the tenacity thing that you'd mentioned, that's really super key because the truth is there's going to be failures in life. You know this. I mean, everyone's had failures. I was speaking at a conference one time. I could still picture this woman. She was sitting about 3 rows back, and I was talking about how failure is inevitable. You ought to be seeking failure because that's where you learn. That's
Mhm.
where innovation comes. And she was sitting there in the audience. She had her arms crossed, and it came time for the Q&A. I could tell she was pissed at me, and so I called on her, and she said, "Failure is not an option." And I said, "Ma'am, failure is the only option. You must fail."
Yeah.
You know.
How did she respond?
She didn't. Well, she was still had her arms crossed, and so I had
Yeah.
to explain to her what the At the end, she got it. She
Yeah.
pulled me aside afterwards, but I just had to describe to her that nobody comes out of the womb as a Olympic athlete. You
Right.
know, um, everything is a struggle. The common one people hear over and over again is Thomas Edison failed 1,000 times before he got the electric light bulb
Yeah.
to work. Right? Think about any innovative product. It's come from failure over and over again. It's how do we respond
Well,
to
my industry,
that
like as a
failure.
performer, you're walking into a room and it's a completely arbitrary business where it's not about a sport like you score more points, you win. And I talk about this in my book, like you could say, I love, Lady Gaga, right? And some people like, I hate Gaga. It's
Right.
completely arbitrary.
Yes.
But and I was talking to another a buddy of mine, and I was saying, that I think if performers, specifically, high achieving performers, or even just mediocre achieving performers,
Yep.
were to do that in business, they'd be multimillionaires because we're told no so often, so often, so often, no, 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 and you're set up to fail just because of the numbers game.
Yep.
How did you? Was it because you had that viewpoint? How are you able to navigate all of that? Because you also hit some things later on. I don't know if you want to talk about it,
Talk about
with your
anything.
son and
Oh, sure.
and navigating those things with challenges and obstacles that are quite literally life changing.
Well, I'll tell you, my parents, we had our challenges. I don't know any family that's not dysfunctional, but, we had our own dysfunction for sure. Um, my, how do I tie this in? I'm feeling like I should say this.
Yeah.
My, f- my parents had two sets of twins. I'm a
Mhm.
twin, but my older brothers were twins.
Oh wow.
They had a child. One of them died when he's 2 years old. The death of a child is earth-shattering, you know, and I didn't realize that back then. And so, first set of twins, then they have a daughter. One of those twins dies, right? And then they have another set of twins, my brother and I, and then I have a younger sister. And so there was that. I guess I just felt like growing up that I know now I feel bad even saying this, but I think somebody might learn something from this. I've not talked about this before. Is that I felt like my father wasn't present, and I used to be very resentful of him. But I realized as I've gotten to be an older gentleman that he did the best thing. He did the best that he could,
Hmm.
right? And um, and so I don't feel like they were like cheerleaders for us, right? And so
Hmm.
I always felt like I was fighting the fight alone, right? I had to learn about overcoming and defying the odds. The good thing was my father was, I'll tell you, he was very patriotic, and his mantra was, if you start something, you finish it. It's a great lesson
Yeah.
in life, right? And so I did get into Boy Scouts. I was in wrestling. I got into martial arts. And why am I saying these things? Because all of those is like you learn the basics first. You continue to practice the basics no matter what, and you keep layering on more experiences, right? And if you think about my time in the Green Berets, the harder you push your body, the harder you push your mind, the harder you push your spirit, then you can look back when you are faced with challenges and say, oh, I've done that before. If I've accomplished that back then, I can accomplish what's in front of me today. This is where the tenacity muscle gets
Hmm.
built, right? If you're striving to get a little bit better each day. And one of my mantras is tenacity eats talent for lunch. You can have somebody
Awesome.
who's highly talented, but if they don't have the grit and the perseverance to hang on when the going gets tough, you know, They're going to live this gray life of mediocrity.
Yeah.
This is where the underdog phenomenon comes. This is
Yeah.
why like movies like Rocky resonates with
Yeah. Or
people,
Rudy.
right? Or Rudy, right? Right. So,
Such a great film.
so where did that come from? I think it just came from failing so many times in my life, but knowing if I just put one dusty, bloody boot in front of the other, you know, I'm going to succeed. That's the thing that I always talk about. I can hang on longer than I have a very high tolerance for pain
Me
and
too.
suffering,
Yeah.
and I'll just hang on while everyone else drops off the bar.
Somebody
You know?
once told me, it was years ago, it was a great Broadway actress, and we were doing this thing, and she looked at me, she goes, just keep walking.
Yeah.
Just keep walking.
Isn't
And I
that
was
that's
like,
such a great visual? Just keep walking. How
yeah.
long were you on Broadway? How many years?
Oh my gosh. So I started my first Broadway show was a national tour was 1992.
Okay.
And then a year and a half after that, I made my Broadway debut in a show. So, and then I finished Phantom, what, 6.5 years ago, 7 years, 6 years ago, something like that. I mean, it was a long,
Long time.
yeah, like, and in between those, even though it might not be a Broadway show, I'm off doing other shows or television shows. I had somebody calculated it for me at the time when I finished Phantom. I had been on stage live and in front of over 200 million people in
Amazing,
that time.
right?
And that's
Performing, doing what you do,
yeah,
and not all peak performances, probably. I'm going to imagine that there are
no,
probably a handful of mediocre performances. You still got to get back out there again. You get
you
knocked on
got
your butt. You get
there's a live
sacked a
audience.
few
Yeah, like it's
times.
not TV and film. I couldn't stop. Like there's this one funny story. You may have heard it at Craig's where like at one point I'd been in Phantom, I think in maybe a year and a half, and great leading lady Ali Ewalt was playing Christine, and
Uh-huh.
at one point the Phantom runs to one side of the stage and drops down onto the ground, and she runs to the other side of the stage and drops down on the ground, and the Phantom slowly starts to crawl to her singing "Stranger Than You Dreamt It," and I totally forgot the words. And the
I
conductor's
haven't
trying to
heard
give me
this.
the words,
No.
and I'm going zip beat it. And she started laughing at first, like I could see her giggling, and then her eyes went wide, and like she was something. What's happening? And I couldn't get back on. And finally, I got back on, and we left the stage, and she goes, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, I forgot the words." She goes,
Yeah.
"At first, I thought it was funny, and then I was like, wait, maybe he's having a stroke." Like, I mean, but it was one of those things where like, and it happened again, where it wasn't like people who know the show know that there was something went wrong, or my head caught on fire at one point, or my
Yeah.
voice
Yeah.
was got tired. It's just those things where, you're just not firing on all cylinders,
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
just got to keep going.
I had a
Um,
very similar experience. You've seen me on stage
yeah,
before, right? I'm pretty comfortable, right?
yeah,
I,
very
I can command an audience
slightly,
nowadays.
slightly
I love
commanded.
it, right?
It's like your
But
control, command and control.
yes. Well, I'll tell you this though. I remember early on in my speaking career, um, I share this because I want people to realize there are going to be times where there could be some very public failings. So
Yeah.
I was speaking at an event. So I went to this Boy Scout camp when I was younger. I used to be I was a counselor there during my high school years
Mhm.
during the summer, and I had a pretty traumatic event happen at this place that changed my life, right? But so this is why before my 15th birthday. But when I was really reaching a level of notoriety in San Francisco as this budding entrepreneur, and articles were being written about me.
Mhm.
Um, one of my buddies that I grew up with was putting on, I think it was, I don't remember, it was the 50th or 75th anniversary of this Boy Scout camp. And so it's this big celebration, and politicians were going to be there. I think Senator Rick Santorum was supposed to be there, and all these dignitaries were supposed to be there. And so they wanted me to come and do this keynote talk. Basically, small town boy makes good
Yeah.
story, right? And so I was going to do the keynote. And so all these dignitaries were going to come up and speak for a few minutes, and then I was going to do the keynote, right? So this is one of those events where there's a stage, and then all the quote unquote VIPs are sitting on the stage.
Hmm.
You've probably seen this before,
Yep.
right? So we're all sitting up there, and people are going up, and then it's my turn to get up there and finally do the keynote, right? All this has come down to Larry. I get up there to start doing my keynote, and I totally panic. I look across where this really traumatic event had happened to me. I could see where it had happened. And all of a sudden, I totally lost my train of thought.
Hmm.
My knees started shaking. I literally, I thought I was going to throw up. My voice was cracking. I had to put my elbows on the podium. And you see me talk. I don't use a podium.
Yeah.
I'm big when I'm up. I'm moving around. Own, it's my place.
Yeah.
My, I had to hold myself up on the podium. My voice was cracking. Do you remember in broadcast news, the flop sweat scene?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like that, the sweat coming down me. I was supposed to be talking for, I forget, 35 or 40 minutes or something like that. But I got like 15 minutes into it and I just had to cut it short. I was like, basically, I'm done. I just cut it off and I, made my way back to the seat, my seat on the stage. And Ted, the guy who invited me, the sponsor of this thing, was sitting right next to me. And he looked over at me and said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "No, no, no." I put my hand on his knee. I said, "I am so sorry." And he said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm just sorry." And he said, "Good. I thought you were having a heart attack up
Right.
there." It was that bad. So
Wow.
why am I sharing this with you? Because that was on a Saturday. On Monday, I had to go back and do a leadership summit for the hotel company based in San Francisco.
Hmm.
And we've got, I don't know, 30 or 40 of our top people there. And about half of them reported directly to me, right? And so I go to speak in front of these, let's say 40 people. And what's going through my mind, James?
The last.
Exactly the last time,
Yeah.
right? Who do you
The
think
quote
you
unquote
are?
failure. Yeah.
Exactly. Who do you think you are? You're a fraud, right? And so I go up on stage and guess what? I bombed again,
Mm.
right? And I was looking at my business partner boss and he was he was pissed, right? You're supposed to be the leader here and you can't even talk to people that you know? Are you kidding me? But as I came off the stage, I grabbed Katie's hand. Katie was my executive assistant at the time. And we walked around to the back and I said, Katie, I don't care what you do. You have to get me 30 talks in 30 days. I said,
Wow.
I don't care if I'm speaking at a Girl Scout meeting, at a chamber mixer, or a prayer group at Denny's. You get me 30 talks in 30 days. And when you know it, she did it. Now, there were some days where I didn't have any talks, but there were a couple of Fridays where I did 3 talks in one day, a breakfast meeting, a lunch meeting, and then like an evening mixer or
Hmm.
something like that, right? So I did 30 talks in 30 days. Now, I could have retreated after that second failure and said, "Ugh, public speaking is just not my bag. It's just not my thing." Could have done that. I could have gone 30 or 40 years and just,
Yeah.
oh, that could have been me up there, right?
Yeah.
So what I had to learn to do is I had to stop faking it because I realized I was faking it. When I was getting on stage, I was trying to be that person that I saw or that person that I saw instead of just being me when I got up there.
Yeah.
And so a lot of lessons learned. And now I look back and think if I would have given in to my weaker self, my fearful self, then I would not have touched the millions of people that I've touched through TV appearances, speaking on stages, corporate trainings, or whatever it is. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a good lesson in life. And my kids knew that story. And, because my kids they're plagued by the same thing I am sometimes. Right. And,
Mhm.
but this is where the tenacity eats talent for lunch thing. I was
Yeah.
tenacious. I was not going to give up
Yeah.
just
You
because I had
kept going. I mean, the fact that you literally said 30 in 30 days,
yeah,
no matter what happens, you're going to do 30 in 30 days. It is that get back up, throw the ball, get back up, throw the ball, get back up,
that's
throw
right.
the ball, you know,
That's right.
and, you know, it's such a valuable lesson because I think like what hit me when you were saying that is what if he gave up, right?
Yeah.
I would never have met you.
Nope.
I would have never been inspired by you. You would have never reached the people because you now, I mean, you've been doing it since then, but you coach, you inspire, you talk.
Right.
This is
Right.
what you do.
Yeah.
And, I say this all the time, and I've said it to the people I work with, and I said, even if there's just one person in an audience that you touch, their
Hmm.
life may be changed by something. You never know who's sitting there listening,
Yeah.
whose life, or they need what you're saying. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, until you do it, you don't know that you've got that kind of impact. I'm sure you've had the same thing that I have. When you walk off stage and all of a sudden there's a line of people that are standing there and they want to share their life with you,
Hmm.
that impacted me. That changed me. Or they challenge you. These are all good things,
Yeah.
right? Um, and if I had just sat back and, put my light under the bushel, as they say, who the heck knows where I would be, or where there, or where these people might be? Because sometimes there's only one person in life whose message can move someone.
Right.
Right? Now, you may hear the same story over and over and over and over again, but as a parent, you've probably seen this. You tell your children or encourage your children to do
Yeah.
something over and over and over, and then all of a sudden, and they don't do it, and then all of a sudden, they come home, Dad, Mr. Somebody from across the street said this, and it's brilliant, and you're like, honey, I've been saying this to you for 15 years or whatever it is, right?
Yeah, for sure. It's that different viewpoint.
It's a different viewpoint, and
Yeah.
so we don't know what the ripple effect is on our message in the world. So we just have to trust our higher power. God is what I call it. That God's got a plan for
Yeah.
us, right? And you got to get in the battle. Life is a battle sometimes, but too often we let fear prevent us from getting in that battle.
100%. What
Yeah.
what what made you, well, I don't know. I mean, I don't even know if it made you pivot, but because you're still doing all of the investments in the hotelier and stuff, but you're actually, you have these coaching programs and things like that.
Yeah.
What's the future for Larry? Like what's the goal, or what are you working on now? Because I know,
Yeah.
again, you've been through so much, but like, where is it that, like, your legacy, what do you want that to be?
Well, I'm writing that chapter now, as it
Mhm.
turns out. You mentioned my son earlier. So my son transitioned, was killed in a car accident 3 years ago, about a month ago. The anniversary was about a month ago.
Wow.
And the last 3 years, I've had to do a lot of self-reflection. Like, what does this mean
Mhm.
to me? He was supposed to be, he would be the last Broughton in my lineage, right? My daughter is engaged to be married, and she's going to take her husband's name, I'm sure. Um, but it was like my son, I called him Bullet. My son Bullet was like it, right? And so the chapter is being written on like, what's the legacy going to look like? I do know this, um, that what has been solidified is that my former hotel company was all about, we owned about a third of the hotels that were in our portfolio, and the other two-thirds it's called a third-party management company. They would hire us to operate their hotels
Mhm.
uh, for them. And what I realized, particularly after my son's transition, is I don't want to be in that daily grind any longer. Okay, we're actually running the hotels. We'll still be in the hotel industry, but what we're doing is we're putting together investment groups to buy the hotels, and then my company stays on as the asset manager, and my company manages the management company, if that makes sense. For
Yeah,
those
so
that are in
you
the real
you
estate
hire a
industry.
you to do what you were
Right.
doing for the other companies. So smart.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we make our fees on the origination fee of the
Mhm.
deal, on the disposition of the deal, our equity position in the deal, and then from the asset management company, which is a separate entity, we get paid a smaller percent, but it's less work, lower overhead, right? And so the management company takes on the burden of liability, right?
Mhm.
So we're doing that. The coaching and mentoring part is like, that's really where my heart has always been, because
Yeah.
I think I may have been a teacher or a guru or a sensei or something in a former life. I love the teaching, and I've realized that my gifting is in creating leaders and entrepreneurs. I this thing I say over and over again: the government is not going to save us. It's not. I firmly believe it's going to be the entrepreneur class.
Mhm.
The biggest innovations in the world have not been made through government, with the exception of our founding documents
Right.
that founded this company or this country. That exception, politicians rarely save our bacon. It's the entrepreneur class. This is where the innovation comes from. This is where the opportunity comes from. More people have been lifted out of poverty through the entrepreneur class and capitalism than any government program, right? That's just a fact,
Yeah.
right? And so I think that because of the struggles I had early on in my entrepreneurial career, I just don't think there are enough real entrepreneurs who are mentoring other entrepreneurs. I think there's a lot of snake oil salespeople who are
Mhm.
selling BS coaching and mentoring programs in the entrepreneurial space. You and I could probably list a dozen of those people pretty darn quickly, They're great marketers, but they really don't know what they're talking about when it comes to the entrepreneurial space. And so, since I didn't have any of those folks early on in my career, I spend a lot of time doing that now. And I'm trying to help people break the multi-generational curses of poverty that many people are faced with, right? And so I get my juices filled that way. So my legacy is probably going to be around that. It's also going to be around, like, I've started uh, a foundation to support mental health for teens.
Hmm.
I think that really became apparent during the pandemic
Yeah.
period. There's a big spike of a big spike of mental health issues among our young adults and teenagers that I like to help address
Yeah.
as well.
It's interesting because I see, we didn't have it. I didn't have an iPhone growing up, like,
Yeah,
I had to get up and turn the channel on the television, or, my dad had to, like, on the roof, he's up there with the antenna, and we had three stations, and like
yeah,
the screen thing and the constant bombardment with images and the constant bombardment with,
yeah,
look, I'm driving this Lamborghini, or look at this, look at that keeping up with the Joneses thing. It's not real. And,
yeah.
I think that plays a big, big, big part of it. We were walking, my older daughter and I, and there's a police officer lives around the corner from us, and his kids don't use devices at all.
Good.
They're always outside. They're always
Yeah,
doing stuff. They're younger, but they, she's like, they're always like doing things. They're painting, they're
yeah.
drawing, they got chalk. They're
Awesome.
always out. And unfortunately, I think devices have become part of society. I mean, unfortunate or fortunate. It's a great technology, the entrepreneurial aspect of that.
Sure.
Schools are using them, but
Sure.
it's separating them out so that you're not glued to them as
Hmm.
your life, as your finding value through you, through them of you, or finding your own value through these screens.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
it's a great thing you're doing. Well, buddy, I
Yeah.
can't
Thanks.
thank you enough.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I love getting on here. Listen, you're a great guy, and I want more people to know who you are as well.
Thank you.
Um, because yes, you're the actor guy, you're the Broadway guy for sure, but I've seen you in action coaching people as well. And the heart that you lead with is so evident. I don't If people have not seen you in that space, I think that they're missing out on something. I think we
Well,
just need
thank
more heart-centered leaders
I do
right
too.
now.
Well, it's funny because you were part of the one of the programs I launched, and you're, when you came on and you're talking, I'm like, you said, well, I'm mentoring people. I'm like, I need Larry Broughton. I want Larry Broughton as my mentor, right? As my guide, as my guru, you know.
We all
Um,
need folks by our side
yeah,
for sure. I just
for
don't think
sure.
we have that. One of the things that I say, James, is that we need to split people in our lives into three groups. A third of the people in our lives ought to be the mentor types, the people that are further down the path
Hmm.
than we are. A third of the people ought to be like where we are, like peers. These are people who like go arm in arm into battle with you, right? And then the other third of people that we ought to be mentoring. These are people that are behind us in
Hmm.
our experience, right? I There are a lot of people who have mentors, or a lot of people who know the peer thing, but they aren't actively mentoring anyone.
Right.
And that component is so important for anyone who's been a medical doctor into martial arts. You learn as much by teaching, maybe more by teaching than you do by actually being in the student role.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that's an important element.
I agree with
Anyway,
you.
don't get me
Well,
rambling.
no, look, bro, I could talk to you all day. We should do a part
Yeah,
two,
let's
very,
do it.
very soon.
Let's do it.
But again, I thank you for being here. You're a wealth of knowledge.
For you.
I am truly, truly honored. Like,
Thank you.
when I reached out and you're like, yeah, I'll do it. I was like, wow, man, this is going to raise the bar for the Star Power podcast. So
I've seen some of your folks on here. Don't blow smoke, man. You
I'm
guys are great.
not, man. You know me, I've been around too long to blow smoke up people's butts. But,
Well, this has been an honor. Thank you for letting me be on here. I really
yeah, you're
appreciate it.
welcome. You're
Good to
welcome.
see you. Let's get together soon.
You got it. I'm going to take us out. Well, listen, what more could you want in knowledge and insight than you got from Larry on this episode? And as I always say, your destiny's waiting. It's up to you to go and get it. We'll see you on the next one.
God bless you.
If you like the content of Star Power, we'd love to hear it. Give us a like and share it out to your friends.